Birthdays pass. Some people celebrate, some quietly ignore them. No parties, no candles, no attention. At first, it feels empty, even strange. But in that silence, something else emerges. There is something unusual about birthdays that rarely gets spoken about. They arrive quietly on the calendar, but they carry noise with them. Expectations, scripts, obligations disguised as kindness. A birthday is supposed to feel personal, yet over time, it begins to feel public. From an early age, we are taught that this day matters not because of what we feel, but because of how it is marked. There is a correct way to experience it, a correct level of gratitude, a correct amount of joy, even a correct emotional tone. You're expected to be available, to respond, to perform appreciation. And if you don't, something feels off. Not just for others, but for you. As the years pass, birthdays stop feeling like milestones and start feeling like appointments. A fixed date where happiness is scheduled in advance, regardless of your internal state. The day doesn't ask how you are, it tells you how you should be. Psychologically, this creates tension, because emotions do not work on command. Meaning does not arrive on schedule. Yet birthdays insist on both. They ask you to feel something specific at a precise moment in time, and to make it visible. For some people, this is energizing. For others, it becomes quietly exhausting. Skipping your birthday rarely begins as a conscious decision. It often starts as a subtle resistance, a hesitation, a feeling that the day asks for more than you have available. Not sadness, not resentment, just fatigue. There is a kind of emotional labor attached to birthdays that becomes heavier with age. You are no longer just receiving attention, you are managing it. Responding to messages, acknowledging gestures, meeting expectations that were not chosen, only inherited. And beneath it all lies an unspoken pressure to show that your life is going well. Birthdays are symbolic checkpoints, moments where progress is implied, where people look at you not just as you are, but as a timeline, where age becomes a quiet evaluation. What have you achieved? Where are you now? Are you happy? Even if no one asks these questions out loud, the day carries them. For some, skipping the birthday is a way to step out of this evaluation, to refuse the comparison, to exist without summary. It is not a rejection of time, it is a rejection of ceremony. There is also something deeply unnatural about compressing an entire year of existence into a single day of acknowledgement. Life is not lived in highlights. Growth does not announce itself. Change happens gradually, invisibly, often without witnesses. And yet the birthday asks you to package yourself, to present a version of who you are now, neatly framed, emotionally accessible, and socially acceptable. For those who are introspective, this can feel intrusive. The more inward a person becomes, the less they want their inner life translated into ritual. Silence begins to feel more honest than celebration. Absence more accurate than presence. Skipping your birthday is not about disappearing. It is about not wanting to be reduced. It is about choosing a day that belongs to you, even if it looks like any other day, especially if it looks like any other day. Because sometimes, the most meaningful way to acknowledge time passing is not to mark it loudly, but to let it pass quietly. And in that quiet, something subtle happens. the day loses its authority. Time becomes internal again, and you are no longer performing your existence, you are simply living it. There is a strange expectation attached to birthdays that few people openly question. It is not just that something should happen, it is that you should feel a certain way. Happiness on this day is not optional, it is scheduled. From the outside, this expectation looks harmless. Messages arrive, people reach out. Gestures are made with good intentions. But beneath this kindness lies a quiet pressure. To respond correctly, to feel visibly grateful, to confirm that the ritual is working. You are not just living the day, you are validating it. Psychologically, this creates a subtle dissonance. Emotions do not follow calendars. Joy does not appear on demand. Yet birthdays insist on emotional punctuality, a specific feeling, at a specific time, expressed in a recognizable way. If you feel it naturally, the day flows. If you don't, the day becomes work. You smile a little longer than you want to. You answer messages more carefully than usual. You reassure others, and sometimes yourself, that everything is fine. This is not deception, it is compliance. Modern culture treats happiness as a performance, especially on symbolic days. Birthdays become proof-of-life moments, signals that you are doing well, that your life is moving forward, that nothing is fundamentally wrong. Even silence feels suspicious. When you skip your birthday, you step out of this performance. You refuse to compress your emotional reality into something consumable. You allow the day to exist without confirmation. This refusal is often misunderstood as negativity, but in reality, it can be an act of emotional honesty. There is a quiet violence in forced positivity. Not loud, not intentional, but persistent. It teaches people to distrust their own internal rhythms, to override how they feel in order to meet expectation. Over time, this creates emotional fatigue. You begin to associate the day not with reflection or gratitude, but with obligation. The kindness of others becomes something to manage rather than receive. Attention becomes a responsibility. And so, skipping the birthday becomes a form of relief. Not relief from people, but relief from expectation. Without the ritual, the day loses its emotional script. You are no longer required to demonstrate happiness. You are allowed to feel neutral, or reflective, or simply present. This neutrality is important. Psychology rarely talks about emotional neutrality as something valuable. Yet it is often the most honest state. Not high, not low, just real. A quiet alignment between inner and outer experience. When you remove the demand to be happy on cue, you give yourself back the right to feel accurately, to let joy appear when it wants to, and disappear when it doesn't. This does not make you less appreciative. It makes your appreciation less performative. Skipping the birthday is not a rejection of joy. It is a rejection of timing. A refusal to outsource your emotional calendar to social convention. Some moments of happiness are private. Some forms of gratitude are silent. Some years do not want to be summarized. And perhaps that is why the idea of scheduled happiness begins to feel hollow with time. As awareness deepens, authenticity matters more than display. Feeling something genuinely on an ordinary day starts to feel more meaningful than performing it on the correct one. By stepping away from the expectation to be happy on demand, you reclaim something subtle but essential: emotional autonomy. The right to feel what you feel, when you feel it, without explanation. And in that quiet refusal, the birthday loses its power. it becomes just another day, which for some people is exactly the point. At some point, skipping your birthday stops being accidental. It becomes a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a statement meant to provoke or explain. Just a quiet turning away from something that no longer feels honest. This refusal is rarely directed at people. It is directed at structure. At the invisible contract that says this day must be observed in a specific way, with specific emotions, performed for others to recognize. To refuse that contract is not to reject connection. It is to reject obligation disguised as meaning. Psychologically, this kind of refusal is significant. It marks a shift from external regulation to internal authority. Instead of allowing social rhythm to dictate emotional experience, the individual begins to trust their own timing. This is not withdrawal, it is autonomy. Many people confuse refusal with bitterness. But bitterness is reactive. It carries resentment. The refusal to celebrate is often calm, even relieving. It feels less like loss and more like alignment. For the first time, the day does not interrupt you. It passes through you. There is also a subtle courage involved. Choosing not to participate in a widely accepted ritual creates friction. It invites misunderstanding. Silence is rarely neutral in a culture that equates visibility with health. Yet refusal does not seek to be understood. It seeks to be accurate. By not marking the day publicly, you remove yourself from comparison. There is no need to measure progress, justify your position in life, or translate your inner world into something socially legible. You are no longer required to explain who you are becoming. This can feel unsettling at first. Without ritual, time feels exposed. There is no symbolic pause, no narrative checkpoint, just continuity. But continuity is not emptiness. It is freedom. When you refuse the birthday, you allow the year to remain open-ended. You do not compress 12 months into a single emotional moment. You let meaning distribute itself naturally, unevenly, across ordinary days. Psychologically, this reduces pressure. There is no emotional deadline, no expectation to feel resolved, grateful, or accomplished by a certain date. The refusal creates space. In that space, self-relationship changes. You begin to notice how much of your emotional life was shaped by anticipation and reaction. Without the event, emotions settle into a more honest rhythm. You stop preparing. You stop summarizing. You stop performing closure. This does not mean you ignore time. It means you stop ceremonializing it. Aging, in this context, becomes quieter, less dramatic, less symbolic, but also less threatening. Time no longer stands in front of you, asking for proof. It moves alongside you. The refusal is not about erasing the self. It is about removing the stage. And when the stage is gone, something unexpected happens. The self does not disappear. It becomes less defined, but more real. Less narrated, but more lived. This is why the refusal often feels peaceful rather than rebellious. It does not argue with tradition. It simply steps aside. No announcement, no explanation, no replacement ritual. Just a day that passes, and a person who remains intact. In refusing the birthday, you are not rejecting meaning. You are choosing where meaning comes from. And for many, that choice marks a quiet but profound turning point. The moment life stops asking to be celebrated and starts asking to be lived. When the birthday is removed, something unexpected happens to time. It loosens. Without ceremony, time no longer gathers itself into a single point. It stops asking to be noticed. Days are no longer pulled toward one symbolic center. They spread out, uneven and quiet, as life naturally is. This can feel disorienting at first. Rituals give structure. They divide experience into chapters. They tell us when to pause, when to reflect, when to assign meaning. Without them, time feels less narrated and more exposed. But exposure is not emptiness. Time without ceremony does not disappear. It becomes continuous, less dramatic, but more honest. Instead of being punctuated by events, it flows. Meaning no longer arrives on cue. It accumulates slowly, often unnoticed. Psychologically, this shift is profound. Humans are trained to anchor identity to markers, birthdays, anniversaries, milestones. These moments reassure us that time is being accounted for. When those anchors are removed, identity becomes less chronological and more experiential. You stop asking, "What year am I in?" and start asking, "How am I living?" This changes how memory works. Without a ceremonial pause, memories are not grouped into highlights. They remain distributed across ordinary days. Small moments gain weight. Repetition becomes meaningful. The texture of daily life thickens. In this way, skipping the birthday can actually deepen one's relationship with time. There is no longer a single day responsible for carrying reflection or gratitude. These things emerge naturally, in moments that feel ready for them. A walk, a conversation, a quiet realization that arrives without announcement. Time begins to feel less like something passing in front of you and more like something you are inside of. This shift also softens the anxiety around aging. Without ritualized checkpoints, age loses its symbolic force. You are not required to confront time in a condensed, evaluative way. Years do not demand explanation. They simply leave traces. Philosophically, this aligns with older understandings of time. Before modern calendars and personal anniversaries, time was cyclical, environmental, embodied. It was felt through seasons, not dates, through change, not numbers. By removing the birthday, even quietly, you return to a slower relationship with time, one that values continuity over climax, presence over punctuation. This does not mean life becomes monotonous. It becomes textured. Moments are no longer ranked by importance. There is no special day carrying symbolic weight. Every day has the potential to be meaningful or ordinary, without hierarchy. This can be unsettling in a culture obsessed with highlights, but it is also freeing. Time no longer asks to be performed. It does not need to be celebrated to be valid. In time without ceremony, growth becomes less visible but more stable. Change is not announced, it is lived. You stop narrating your life in chapters and begin experiencing it as a continuous movement. And within that movement, something quiet but powerful emerges. Patience. Patience with yourself, with progress, with becoming. Without the pressure to mark time, you allow it to work on you gently. You stop demanding meaning from specific days and start allowing it to arise where it naturally belongs. In this sense, skipping the birthday is not a denial of time. It is a surrender to it, a willingness to let time pass without interruption, without ceremony, without commentary. And in that uninterrupted flow, life begins to feel less like a series of moments to manage and more like a space to inhabit. When the birthday is no longer marked, something subtle takes its place. Not emptiness, not absence, but a different kind of presence. Without the pressure to be acknowledged, attention turns inward, not in isolation, but in alignment. You are no longer locating yourself through reaction or recognition. You are simply where you are. Presence, in this sense, is not about intensity. It is about steadiness. Modern life often equates being present with being seen. Moments are considered real once they are shared, validated, and mirrored back. But this creates a fragile form of existence, one that depends on response. When you stop marking the birthday, you begin to experience life without requiring confirmation. Days no longer ask to be justified. You wake up, move through time, and rest, all without needing an external witness. This changes the quality of attention. Without performance, attention becomes slower, more spacious. You notice details not because they are interesting, but because they are there. Sound, light, small movements. The ordinary regains weight. Psychologically, this is a return to embodied presence. Instead of managing how you appear in time, you inhabit time directly. The self becomes less narrative and more experiential. You are not telling a story about your life. You are living it. This kind of presence also reshapes connection. Relationships become less about marking occasions and more about continuity. You stop meeting people at checkpoints and start meeting them in the flow of shared time. Conversation deepens. Silences become easier. There is less urgency to commemorate and more room to simply remain. Importantly, this presence does not erase joy. It refines it. Joy no longer needs a container. It appears quietly, unexpectedly, in moments that were not scheduled to hold it. A morning walk, a conversation that lingers, a sense of alignment that cannot be posted or summarized. In this way, skipping the birthday does not diminish meaning. It redistributes it. Meaning spreads across days instead of concentrating on one. Life becomes less about peaks and more about texture. Less about recognition, more about resonance. There is also a gentle humility in this presence. Without a day that centers you, the world feels less oriented around the self and more shared. You are not the subject of time. You are part of it. This can feel grounding. The desire to be marked softens. The need to be acknowledged fades. What remains is not indifference, but ease. A sense that you are allowed to exist without punctuation. In the end, skipping the birthday is not about rejection. It is about replacement. Replacing performance with presence. Replacing ceremony with continuity. Replacing visibility with belonging. You are no longer asking time to stop for you. You are moving with it. And in that movement, something quietly stabilizing emerges. A life that does not need to be celebrated to feel real, just lived.